Hi everyone. This is our lecture for week 4 on the readings The Color Purple and Why Punishment is Purple. This week we only have one recording because the subject matter on these readings they're relatively similar. The readings address different things, and I do want you to do both readings absolutely. But the material I feel that is needed for me to address separately is it's so similar that I'm just condensing it into one lecture. And, you have to listen to me a little bit less. So, for this, we will be talking about politics and crime. We'll be talking about fighting crime in the 1990s. What political efforts were taken to fight crime. Then we will talk about our discussion prompt and also our essay prompt. So, politics. Both Republicans and Democrats have different views on how to deal with crime, and since we are a predominantly two-party system, I will address those. Sure, Green Party candidates, Libertarian candidates also have views on how to deal with crime, but the political reality in our country is that the Republicans and Democrats get to make the major decisions because of the structure of our society. So, and these are generalizations. In general, Republicans politically, ideologically tend to favor harsh penal sanctions. So they tend to say, well, if you do something wrong, you should be punished for it. And also, in general, this ideology opposes rehabilitation, and a simplified way to sum that political ideology up is that criminals are hopeless or undeserving, and it's a waste of money because these people did something wrong to try to rehabilitate them. Why should we help them? Because they hurt somebody else. That's the general perspective there. And, that's a perspective. Democrats, then, in general, politically, tend to support less punitive penalties, tend to be more about rehabilitation and more about treatment. These are the ideologies that tend to plug into their worldview. So, if you take that, you would predict a Democrat to tend to see criminals as people who have made mistakes, and potentially rehabilitation within prisons will make them better citizens in the future, keeping in mind that criminals will be getting out of jail. That is, again, a simplified view of the Democratic worldview in terms of crime. Now, a lot of this was kind of turned on its head, especially the Democrat worldview relating to crime in the 1990s. So, outside of context, the Democrat and Republican consensus on the prison system during the 1990s doesn't make very much sense at all, and the Democrats' actions seem to make the least sense. So, the Democrat crime-fighting agenda ran very contrary to their other values during the 1990s. So, in general, if you take a Democratic worldview, you would suspect that Democrats would be more about rehabilitation. You would suspect that Democrats would be more opposed to harsh penalties. But in the late 80s and early 90s, Republicans were winning elections based on fighting crime. So the Democrats had to make a strategic decision. They were losing by large margins, and they didn't have so much power in the 1990s. So they were losing by large margins, so they made a strategic decision. Well, the American people don't really want rehabilitation. And the American people want to put criminals away for long periods of time. So if that's what the American people want, maybe we should get off our high horse and give them what they want. So during the 90s, both parties were starting to compete to see who could be the toughest on crime. And in the end, and there is more detail on this in the book, and I do want you to write about that in your paper. I want you to include the parts I left out. But in the end, Bill Clinton, a Democrat, wound up being way harder on crime and wound up doing a lot more work to build our prison system as it is today than Ronald Reagan or George H.W. Bush did. So, or George W. Bush for that matter. So, the Democrats, and you see that on the chart, I believe it's on page 56, the Democrats are largely responsible, working also with Republicans for building the prison system as it is today in a way that most Democrats wouldn't be very happy with. And as a result of this growth, the prison system boomed in the 1990s. It's quite frankly, from a political science perspective, from any sort of social science perspective, it's very, very interesting, that strategic decision they made. So the prison system boomed in the 1990s. The truth in sentencing laws, as they were called, were passed, requiring inmates to serve at least 85% of their prison sentence. Keep in mind that one method of making the prison system not as bloated is to release prisoners early who have showed good behavior, and that serves a positive incentive in the prisons to keeping them, less dangerous for the prisoners, right? So if they're on good behavior, you let them out. This served to make them serve at least 85% of their sentences, which had the function of raising the prison population. These truth in sentencing laws also massively increased funding for police forces and for building more prisons. This means more quote-unquote criminals could be caught and more prisons could be built. It also denied Pell Grants to inmates. Thus, remember, some of you probably have Pell Grants. Pell Grant being government money to pay for your education. This said, government money cannot go toward education for inmates, so inmates simply couldn't afford that tuition money to make themselves better, and that then hindered the rehabilitation aspects of that could be had in prison. 3 strikes laws were passed in many states. This means that sentences of 25 to life would be given to any convicts who served 2 serious crimes and any additional felony, even a lower level felony. So, and this ties back to our concept of recidivism. Remember, because people are not getting rehabilitated in our prisons, people who come out of prison don't have many options. They don't have the skills they could need to get a good job. They often have lost track of their family members, so they don't have anywhere else to turn, so they commit more crimes. So, if you commit crimes after you get out of prison, or get out of prison twice, that 3rd crime will get you in prison from 25 years to life. This could go really haywire when you start doing some of the mental calculations. So one burglary, one breaking and entering to steal like a PlayStation or something, plus 1 burglary, plus, in some states, a minor possession of something like marijuana during this era could have led to life imprisonment. So 2 relatively minor plus an incredibly minor crime could lead to life imprisonment. Or, to make that even more incongruous with modern day society, especially in the states, especially incongruous with the states where marijuana is now legal. 2 marijuana dealing convictions. So let's say you were a marijuana dealer in the 90s, plus 1 minor possession. So not even dealing after your, but so let's say you learned your lesson after dealing weed twice. And then you get out, but you still use it, and you're caught with a little in your pocket. Well, basically, what happens then is a habitual stoner would get 25 to life. Like, most likely 25. But still, a massive chunk of their life is taken away and to be put in prison. But on the contrary, and this is what it was intended to do, someone who rapes someone and then murders 2 people, they also get life sentences. That's what they were thinking about when they were doing this legislation. That's what politicians and the people who were voting for politicians, they wanted dangerous people to be put in prison, right? That's what they wanted. But it had the side effects of putting petty thefts and serial drug users in prison. And, drug addicts too. Not just, obviously not just marijuana, but heroin dealers, and, other people who deal other types of more serious drugs. So your discussion prompt, I want you to talk about the change that occurs via political means. And since the 2-party system has not addressed our prison system and has actually built our prison system, how do we fix the broken system? Can we cause social change with the current political system we have? Can we fix the prison system with the current system we have? Or do we have to find another way to do it? Or maybe has the political system changed since the 90s in a way that we can fix it? And what would that look like? And then that prompt is a little better developed on Blackboard if you need some help with that. The essay prompt then for your weekly writing, I want you to explain what the ideologically consistent approach to the problem would be for either party. I talked about that a little bit in this lecture. It talks about it in more detail in the readings. And then explain how these approaches came to be so similar to the realities of the political system. So put in different, more simple words, how did the Democrats and Republicans come to consensus that we need to build our prisons as big as possible in this country? And then further details are available on Blackboard Learn. You have a more detailed essay prompt then. So as always, if you have any questions, please let me know. And I look forward to our conversation.